Welcome back to Naming in the AI Age. Now, last week I talked about using AI to create a name. This week I wanted to talk about, really probably the most important element of creating a great brand name. Whether you do it yourself, whether you use a naming contest, whether you hire an agency, regardless of the approach, there's one sort of first step that's just critical. And a lot of people have poo-pooed, they've really talked about, you don't need this, right? And maybe you don't. And it's the creative brief, right? And the creative brief has gotten a bad rap over the years as an excuse consultants use to come in and spend a lot of time interviewing everybody and, doing all this legwork and coming up with this long, lengthy document that may or may not be needed. And while it creates some buzz and some excitement and some energy and gets everybody sort of on the same page heading forward, some people argue, well, you really don't need to do that. So here's what I believe is true, having done this for 40 years and worked on, thousands of these projects, is sometimes you don't need a creative brief. And sometimes you need a short creative brief. And sometimes that exhaustive effort is well worth it. So let's talk about when you don't need it. And I would say this is the minority of the times, but it is something that I think you should consider. If you have a very niche product, and you don't have to worry too much about competition. So let's say you're just in a local geography. It could be a restaurant, it could be an automotive service, some type of small business. You know your customers well, and you're maybe changing your company name because you want to provide some new services that are related to what you currently do. But you really feel like you're well established and your reputation's there, and you've got a pretty good idea on what you want that name to do, and you certainly know who you want to target. And you're really in touch with the pulse of the marketplace. I'm not sure you need a creative brief. I mean, we've worked with folks before in that situation. In 5-10 minutes, we can probably suss out all that we need to really help them move forward and develop some names for them that resonate exceptionally well. Now, let's go to the next step where you need a creative brief and maybe it's not super long and involved. And that really depends not so much on the business you're in, not so much on the geographic scope, not so much even whether it's B2C or B2B. It depends on your budget. How much money do you have to spend? I think it depends upon the sophistication of your marketing, your brand building effort, and where you are on that journey. And certainly the competitive landscape that you're wrestling with. And I'll be real honest with you here. And I think that's part of the value that an old guy that's been doing this for a while can bring to the table. A lot of our clients really aren't that sophisticated. They're not brand experts. They've done well. They might come from an engineering tech background and be extremely sharp analytically, but they're not marketing types. Or they may be seat of your pants entrepreneurs that have succeeded for years or decades in building a strong brand, whether it's local, regional, national, even global, but they really haven't ever really leaned into, well, how do you build a brand? What are all the ways today that you need to stay in touch with your customers? How can you propagate your message out to the world? How do you use your own employees as influencers versus going out and paying for well-known social influencers? Why you really don't need to advertise anymore at all, or in a very constrained way, almost regardless of what industry you're in. So if you're not very sophisticated, then we help you through that process. And I think the basics of the brief are really important. So what are those basics? What do you want the name to do? I mean, really, what do you want the name to do? Who are you targeting? Describe your target as best you can. How conservative are they? How will they react to an edgy name? Are they willing to consider something that's sort of innovative and out of the box? What are their hot buttons? Who are your competitors? And how do you differentiate from your competitors, right? What is something that you do better, or that people perceive you do better than anyone else, or that you want to hang your hat on in the future that you think is a sustainable, key differentiator that you can really claim and that you can really own? And then how will you use the name, right? Think about the different venues. It's going to appear in signage or on vehicles if you have a fleet of vehicles, or on your website, or on a trade show booth. Is it going to largely be spoken? Okay, well, how does it sound? Is it easy to pronounce? Those are all things that can be covered in a fairly basic brief, but they're just super important when you come up with a name. Whether you're doing it, again, yourself, whether you're prompting AI, you need to answer those questions and then provide those prompts and those answers to AI if you're going to use AI to help you come up with a name. And our take on that, as I discussed last week, is AI can be a great creative aid. It is certainly not a replacement for the human input and taking what AI comes up with and polishing it. The way I like to think of AI recently, and it's changed a lot in the last 6 months, but the deep reasoning models are really good. If you do it right, it's like you can find a diamond in the rough, right? Before you couldn't do that. Before it would just give you a bunch of, odd looking stones that didn't really glisten. They really didn't glitter. They weren't very bright. It didn't make any difference how much you polish that name. It never was going to rise beyond, a common quartz stone you might find in a riverbed. Well, the new deep reasoning models, they can give you diamonds in the rough. They can give you names that you're still going to have to polish. You may have to tweak. You may use that name as a springboard to a different name, but you would never have gotten there without AI being involved. But once you polish it, right? Once you put your brand magic around it, and that might be a tagline, that might be a logo, that might be copy, that might be a story, which AI can help you with. It really comes alive, right? And AI is good enough now to do that, but probably not to suss out and tell you which one of those names really is that true diamond. I think that's where the human expertise still comes in.
So at the end of the day, a creative brief really is only as useful as it is clear and succinct. For many smaller teams, really even or sophisticated clients that already nailed the basics of the brief, keeping it simple is not just preferred, it's smart to do. Focus on what the name needs to do, who it's for, how it'll show up, how it'll look. That's often more than enough to get great results. But if you do need to dig a little deeper, tune in next week as we dive into a more unpacked, detailed creative brief that dives into brand personality, naming systems, tone, strategy, the whole picture. See you next week.